The laughter at the long oak table was sharp, deliberate like knives hidden behind smiles. Natalie Pierce, 34, a powerful CEO in her sharp black blazer, leaned forward and pointed her wine glass at the man seated quietly at the end. "Tell me, Michael," she smirked, her voice dripping with mockery. "Do you always sit like a ghost at the table? Or is silence the only thing you're good at?" Heads turned. A few chuckles escaped the executives seated nearby. Michael Turner, 38, a quiet single father with worn hands and a shirt that had seen better days, didn't flinch. He simply adjusted his cuff and looked back at her with calm, steady eyes. No one noticed the tension in the air tightening like a rope around their throats. No one expected that within minutes, this quiet man, the one she mocked, would be the only thing standing between Natalie and chaos itself. Before we dive in, drop a comment with where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit subscribe for more videos like this. Let's begin. ***. The dinner was supposed to be routine, an investor's banquet in downtown Chicago. Crystal chandeliers hanging heavy above polished marble floors. The air reeked of perfume, ambition, and a quiet war of egos. Natalie ruled these events like a queen, sharp, witty, merciless with her words. Michael, invited only because his daughter had designed a school project that Natalie's company sponsored, seemed out of place from the very first moment. He wasn't polished like the others. No suit jacket, no diamond watch, just a plain shirt and a calmness that unsettled the room. "Do you even understand the business we're discussing?" Natalie's voice cut through the hum of forks and glasses. "Or are you just here for the free meal?" Some laughed. Michael didn't. His voice, deep but steady, finally broke the silence. "I'm here because you asked. And sometimes," he said softly, "it's the quietest one at the table who's listening the closest." A few eyes widened. Someone coughed awkwardly. Natalie's smirk faltered, but before she could retort, it happened. The crash came like thunderglass. Exploding, screams erupting as the banquet hall doors slammed open. Two masked men stormed in, shouting, waving metal pipes, shoving terrified servers to the ground. Guests gasped, some dropping beneath the tablecloths, others frozen in place. Natalie's hand trembled on her glass, her breath short. The color drained from her face as one of the men bellowed, "Wallets! Phones! Nobody move!" Chaos spread like wildfire. Chairs toppled, voices screamed, jewelry clinked as trembling hands surrendered what they had. But Michael quiet, unnoticed. Michael stood. His chair scraped back, firm and deliberate. One of the masked men lunged toward Natalie, yanking her arm, demanding her necklace. She whimpered, her arrogance stripped away in an instant. For the first time tonight, she wasn't the one in control. And that's when Michael moved. His hand clamped down on the attacker's wrist with surprising force. His voice low but deadly calm. "Let her go." The man cursed, swinging the pipe, but Michael twisted, faster than anyone expected, sending the weapon clattering across the floor. Gasps filled the air. Natalie's eyes, wide and trembling, locked on the same man she mocked only moments ago. The quiet father, the ghost at the table. And now her shield. The hall had transformed into a war zone of sound screams bouncing off marble walls, crystal chandeliers trembling overhead, forks and knives clattering to the floor like metal rain. Executives who'd strutted in earlier, with arrogance, now crawled under tables, clutching their expensive watches and trembling like children. But Michael Turner didn't shake. He didn't hide. His grip tightened on the masked man's wrist until bones creaked. With one quick shove, he sent the attacker sprawling onto the polished floor, the pipe sliding out of reach. The second intruder froze for a heartbeat, stunned that this quiet, unremarkable man had dared to resist. His hesitation didn't last. He roared and lunged at Michael with a knife flashing in the chandelier light. Gasps erupted. Natalie's breath snagged in her throat. For the first time in years, her sharp tongue failed her. She could only whisper, "Michael." As though his name itself was a prayer, Michael didn't flinch. He sidestepped with surprising precision, his shoulders slamming into the attacker's ribs. The knife clattered away, skidding beneath the table. With a swift movement, Michael kicked the man's legs from under him and pressed him face down to the ground. It wasn't polished martial arts. It wasn't elegant. It was raw, practical moves learned not in gyms, but in nights when survival meant defending yourself and your family. "Stay down," Michael growled, his voice carrying a weight that silenced even the screaming guests. A moment, the chaos froze. People peeked out from behind overturned chairs, eyes wide. They had just witnessed the quietest man in the room dismantle. Two armed intruders with nothing but grit and steady hands. Natalie's chest heaved. Her mind raced back to every mocking word she had flung at him minutes earlier. "Do you even understand the business we're discussing?" Her voice from earlier echoed like poison in her ears. She had seen him as less polished, less valuable, less worthy of sitting at her table. But now, as he stood between her and danger, she realized how wrong she had been. The intruders, bruised but not unconscious, scrambled toward the exit, panicked. They hadn't expected resistance, especially not from a man who looked like he belonged in the shadows of the room. One spat a curse over his shoulder as they fled into the night. Silence followed. A suffocating, heavy silence. Then came the applause, hesitant at first, then growing louder. Executives, servers, even security guards who had been frozen in fear rose to their feet. "Did you see that?" one man whispered. "He took them both down," another murmured. But Michael didn't smile. He didn't bow or bask in their awe. He simply straightened his shirt, glanced at Natalie, and walked back to his chair. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. He returned to the same place, where he had been mocked for being invisible. Only now, every eye in the room followed him with a strange mix of gratitude and shame. Natalie stood frozen, her heart pounding. She wanted to speak, but her throat tightened. "How do you apologize for mocking a man minutes before he saved your life?" "Michael," her voice cracked. She stepped closer, her heels clicking against marble. He raised a hand, silencing her without malice. "Don't," he said softly. His tone wasn't bitter, but tired, as if he'd heard too many hollow apologies in his life. Natalie's chest ached. For a woman used to commanding boardrooms and crushing opponents, this was foreign territory, being the one indebted, humbled, at a loss for words. The banquet ended abruptly. Police arrived, statements were taken, and guests dispersed, whispering about the quiet father who turned into a protector. Reporters outside buzzed with questions, cameras flashing as Natalie shielded her face from the press. But Michael didn't wait for thanks. He slipped out the side door into the cold night air, his breath fogging in the wind. Natalie caught him just before he reached the street. "Michael, wait." Her voice was softer now, stripped of mockery. "You could have walked away. You could have let them take everything. Why did you step in?" Michael turned, his tired eyes meeting hers. "Because my daughter's 10 years old. If she were here, scared like you were tonight, I'd want someone to stand up for her. It doesn't take money to protect people, Natalie. Just courage." His words cut deeper than any insult she had ever hurled. They carried no pride, no demand for recognition, just truth. For the first time in years, Natalie felt her composure slip. The woman who had built an empire on power and sharp edges suddenly blinked back tears. "You're a better leader than I am," she whispered, almost to herself. Michael shook his head. "I'm just a dad who doesn't want his kid growing up." In a world where people look away when things go wrong. The words lingered in the air, heavier than the winter wind. Natalie swallowed hard. "At least let me repay you, dinner, a donation for your daughter's school, something." Michael gave a faint, tired smile. "Repay me by remembering tonight the next time you're sitting across from someone you think is beneath you." Natalie stood rooted in place as he walked away into the night. The woman who once mocked him now watched him vanish with the haunting realization that power wasn't about titles or suits. It was about the quiet courage of a father who refused to let fear win. And for the first time in her life, Natalie Pierce wondered if all her success meant anything compared to that. The night after the banquet, Natalie Pierce didn't sleep. She tossed and turned in her penthouse suite, the skyline of Chicago glittering like a promise she no longer trusted. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Michael, his steady hands, the calm fire in his eyes as he protected her, and the way he walked away without asking for anything. For a woman who lived her life in boardrooms filled with sharks, it was disarming. No one ever did something for her without expecting a favor, a contract, or a seat at her table. But Michael had done exactly that, and she had mocked him first. By morning, she made a decision. The next day, Michael was back in his quiet life. His daughter, Emily, 10 years old, with a gap-toothed smile and a backpack nearly bigger than her, was finishing breakfast at their small kitchen table. The apartment was modest, walls patched with wear, but Michael kept it clean. "Dad, you're late again," Emily teased, spooning cereal into her mouth. "You need to eat too, or you'll faint at work." Michael chuckled, ruffling her hair. "I'll grab something on the way. Don't worry about me, kiddo." But Emily worried anyway. She saw the tired lines on his face, the way he skipped meals so she wouldn't. That morning, Michael walked her to school, kissed her forehead, and went straight to his shift at the auto repair shop. The noise of drills, clanging metal, and the smell of oil was his world, a far cry from the marble floors of Natalie Pierce's world. He thought last night would fade into memory. But at DIDN single quotes T. around noon, the rumble of sleek engines broke the routine of the shop. A convoy of black cars pulled up outside, drawing stares from the mechanics. Out stepped Natalie Pierce herself, flanked by assistants in sharp suits. Michael froze mid-wipe, grease on his palms. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered under his breath. The whole shop went silent. Mechanics whispered to each other, gawking. "Is that? No way, the CEO?" Natalie walked straight toward him, heels clicking on concrete. There was no mockery in her eyes today, only determination. "Michael," she said softly, "we need to talk." He sighed, wiping his hands on a rag. "I thought we already did." She shook her head. "No, last night you protected me. And I mocked you before that. I can't let that stand." Michael folded his arms. "You don't owe me anything, Natalie. I didn't do it for you. I did it because it was right." "I know," she said quickly, "and that's exactly why I can't let it go. You showed me what real leadership looks like. And you showed me what kindness really is." The mechanics watched with open mouths, unable to believe the richest woman in Chicago was practically apologizing to one of their own. Michael gave a small, tired laugh. "Words are easy, Natalie. Actions matter more." Her expression softened. "Then let me show you." Later that evening, when Michael picked Emily up from school, a surprise was waiting. Natalie stood near the entrance, holding a backpack nearly identical to Emily's. Emily tilted her head. "Dad, who's she?" Michael cleared his throat. "This is Miss Pierce. She's from work." Natalie knelt down so she was eye level with Emily. Her blazer caught the sunlight, but for once, she didn't look like a CEO. She looked like a woman trying to make things right. "You must be Emily," she said warmly. "Your dad is very brave. He saved me last night." Emily's eyes widened. "Really, my dad?" "I told you he's a hero, Dad." Michael felt heat rise in his cheeks. "All right, kiddo, don't go giving me a cape just yet." Natalie smiled gently. Then she held out the backpack. "This is for you. I noticed yours is a little worn. Inside, there are some supplies, books, even art materials. I heard you like to draw." Emily gasped, taking the bag carefully, like it was treasure. "For me? Wow, thank you, ma'am." Natalie touched her shoulder. "No need to call me ma'am. Just Natalie. Michael watched silently, emotions pulling in different directions. On one hand, he wanted to shield Emily from being used for guilt or image. On the other, he saw sincerity in Natalie's eyes. This wasn't about publicity, it was personal. Days turned into weeks, and Natalie kept showing up. Not with grand gestures for the cameras, but with quiet kindness. She donated anonymously to Emily's school, so kids from struggling families could get free lunches. She arranged for better security at Michael's neighborhood after hearing about rising crime. And once, she sat with Emily during the school art fair, clapping louder than anyone when Emily received a small ribbon for her painting. But her most important change wasn't in donations or appearances. It was in her heart. In boardrooms, she no longer mocked the quiet ones, she listened. She invited janitors, assistants, and low-level staff to share ideas, and sometimes those ideas outshined the executives. She began to see people not as status symbols, but as human beings with stories. One evening, as she and Michael stood outside the shop after closing, she finally asked the question that had been weighing on her. "Michael, why were you so calm?" That night, most people would have panicked. Even I panicked. He exhaled slowly, leaning against the wall. "Because panic doesn't save anyone. My wife, she passed when Emily was 4. Since then, I promised myself I'd never freeze if Emily needed me, I guess. That promise carries over to anyone who's scared, not just her." Natalie swallowed hard, her throat tight. For the first time in years, she felt her eyes sting with tears, not from fear, but from admiration. "You don't even realize it, do you?" she whispered. "You've changed me. I mocked you because I thought silence meant weakness. But it turns out, it meant strength I couldn't even understand." Michael shrugged lightly. "We all learn from each other. Even CEOs," she laughed softly. It was the first genuine laugh he'd heard from her. Weeks later, during another investor dinner, Natalie did something no one expected. When the quietest man at the table was mocked by a fellow executive, she stood. Her voice cut through the chatter. "Be careful who you laugh at. Sometimes the quiet ones are the ones who will save your life when chaos breaks out." Her words silenced the room. Every eye turned toward her, not with amusement, but with respect. And somewhere in the back, Michael, invited again only because Emily had won another small school award, caught her eye. She gave him the faintest nod, a promise unspoken. This time, the quiet man was an invisible dot, and Natalie Pierce wasn't the same woman anymore.